Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of welcoming Neal from Bigfoot Talk back on the show. We had talked to Neal back in episode 659, which really was not that far ago. It was back, I believe, on January 24th that it was released. But I was like, when we finished that episode, I was like, Neal, we got to get you back on to set something up as quick as you can. Neal, welcome back to the show. How's it going, man?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm starting to get through this head cold. I think I'm almost through it. So, but we were talking before the beginning of the show, and we were like, it might be good for you to maybe take a few minutes to get new listeners up to speed. If they want the whole story so far, they're going to have to go back to that episode and really dive into it. But maybe Neal, share a little bit to get listeners up to speed.
Okay, I'll let you know. I'm going to try to make it short because the beginning story of what happened, how they let us know they were here, is really amazing in and of itself. But there's a lot of detail in it that I'm going to leave out. This is just to give you an overview. Basically, when I was a kid, I was in the outdoors all the time and learned a ton about all the animals around. Then my wife and I decided we were going to buy some property for us to retire at. And we found this property in North Georgia that had been abandoned for 8 to 10 years. We cleaned it off. We put up fruit trees, started feeding the deer. It had 2 springs on it and a dried up pond. And then I started seeing things that didn't make sense. What I'm seeing had to be done with something that has hands or something really heavy that is smashing everything on a trail. It made no sense. But there was no bear on that property. It had all the animals that I grew up with. So I saw things that didn't make sense. It didn't match any of the animals that I knew about as a child. So what happened is, one Christmas, the kids gave me a cutout of a Bigfoot painted black. I put it in the backyard. Now we're feeding the deer, we're feeding birds. I'm not hunting. All of a sudden one night, about 2 weeks after Christmas of 2019, something whistles loud in the backyard several times. And my wife came and got me and said, something's out here, come quick. And I know she doesn't lie. I know she's telling the truth. But what she was talking about did not make sense. It did not match any animal in the area that would be in the area. So then 2 weeks after that, they hit the house. It's a brick house and the whole house shook. And we found out later that it actually hit so hard that it cracked her window all the way from the top left edge all the way to the roof, the bricks. It all cracked all the way to the roof. That's how hard the hit was. But nothing matched what could find it. The grass was flattened down. You could see something hit high up on the wall. Anyway, I made some phone calls to some people I know, and I never thought that there could be a Bigfoot here. I was 99.9% sure if there was one living at the time, I was only 50-50, that it'd be on the West Coast. It'd be in California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Canada, the ones where all the shows are on, and they have all the sightings. So I thought it would be there. But what I'm seeing doesn't make sense. So I called this expert. And I say expert, I truly don't believe there's any true expert because nobody really knows. But if there is one, he would be closest to it. Then after talking to him, he basically was telling me that we have a Bigfoot. And I said, well, what is it trying to tell us? And he goes, it's trying to tell you it's there and wants you to know it and coexist with you, which blew my mind. Then I said, that freaked me out. I didn't know how they would know that. And then I asked him how he knew that. He asked me a lot more questions, and the answer to all of them were no. And he said if they didn't want you there, that's what they would be doing. So evidently they had been watching us for many, many years, because it wasn't many, but several years, because we had been here well before that. They had been watching us the whole time. And I guess when we put the Bigfoot cutout, that they decided that we would be somebody good to coexist with. So they decided to let us know. I think they thought by me staring at everything that they had been doing and them seeing me do it, that when I put the cutout out there, that I knew they were here, which I didn't. But I think that's what instigated them letting us know they were here. So then at the beginning, I thought they were just normal animals. And I made a gifting station where I put food out to prove that they were here. I put apples on a tree, but I thought they were like any other animal. So I made a gifting station for them where I could put things to put food on or other gifts and stuff, so I could try to learn about them, try to interact with them. And so things were going good. I gave them some gifted them some marbles. They gifted me back. And then things just moved on from there. Now, I will tell you, I've got all kind of really neat interactions we had with them, but I'll tell you one funny one that's at the gifting station. One time I went down there and I was trying to learn how they eat different things. So along with the regular stuff that we put, I put a huge rotisserie chicken, and I put it in a container and kind of wedged it between other things. It had real high edges because I wanted to see how they ate it, how they picked it up. I'd put things on the legs. I put stainless steel on the legs to stop the raccoons from getting up there. But I was just wanting to see how they would do that. My wife had a small Diet Coke, one of those mini plastic Diet Cokes, and she had drank half of it, and she put it over there on the box. And I said, your Diet Coke's over there? She goes, yeah, I'm leaving it for them, see what they do. I said, okay. So as we leave, we go back probably, I'd say within a week. We go back down there. Actually, no, it was the next day because we wanted to see what they had done. So we put it out on a Saturday and we went back on Sunday. And she's over there looking at the ground, picked something up, and I'm looking at the container where the chicken was, and it had to have been just picked up straight out of the container. The container did not move a bit. I'm looking on the ground. There's no spots where it may have hit the ground. There's no bones. I'm looking in the edge of the woods. There's no bones anywhere. And she goes, look at this. And I see in her hand her small Diet Coke bottle. I said, yeah, it's your Diet Coke bottle. She said, no, look at it again. I looked at it again. I said, yeah, it's your Diet Coke bottle. And she goes, look closer. I looked closer. There was no drink in her Diet Coke bottle. It was gone. But the lid had been screwed back on that little Diet Coke bottle. We checked it. There's no holes. The top was on tight. It couldn't have leaked out. There was no way it could leak out. They drank the Diet Coke, put the lid back on it, and dropped it on the ground. Now, I was telling her, I was like, well, look at this. They took the chicken and took it, and it's gone. They didn't even leave us a bone. They didn't leave us a bone. And I told her 2 or 3 times, I said, I can't believe they just picked it up, didn't eat it in the woods nearby, but they didn't even leave a bone. It's just all gone, which is just kind of a remark you make. You don't mean anything by it. Well, usually in the middle of the week is when I put something out if I have it. That's when I would usually take the trash out. I drive back down there, and in between where I parked and the container where the chicken was is a wing bone, broke in half, sitting there perfectly on the deck of the gifting station. They went and found a bone and gave me a bone because they didn't understand that was just, an expression, something you say. They went and found a bone and brought it back and left it to me. How crazy is that?
That's wild.
I mean, some of the stuff they do, you learn from by accident. Like that was one of them. They don't know expressions like that, but if they think you really mean it, they're going to go take care of it so you're not upset. They left me a bone. So not only did they drink her Diet Coke and screw it back on, and those little Diet Cokes are small. To screw that top back on, you've got to have a lot of flexibility in fingers to put that back on. It's not just something to where you can just pop it down on top. You've got to screw it down tight. So what I want to do next is, this is something I really mess up a lot of times because I've seen so much here. I learned so much from the interactions that I usually just jump into it and talk about the interactions and don't really talk about the sightings that we've had. And let me first tell you that for me to call it a sighting, I have to see a face. I have to see hair, face or hair, and no, it couldn't be any other animal. It has to be one of the first two, and I'd have to know that it's no other animal. So what makes that category is only 4 sightings. Now, I've seen a lot of shapes and shadows in the woods. I've seen taking pictures of them in tree or in the woods that I blow up and I see them, but I don't call that a sighting because it doesn't meet my parameter. I want to make it real hard so that there's absolutely no way it could be anything else. So the first one that we saw was a juvenile. We were sitting at the dining room table one afternoon as a family, and down there on the trail that leads towards a gifting station, I see something black squatted down. And I was just staring at it. I'm like, there's no stump down there. What is down there? And I'm just staring at it and staring at it. And then I look and I'm like, that's a Bigfoot. It's solid black. But the traps on it, and every single one I see something different that catches my attention. This was young and fairly slim, like you would expect like a basketball player to be, but it was probably only 6 to 6.5 foot tall, but it was squatting down. But the traps on that, the trapezius muscles, was unreal. It looked like almost to the end of the shoulders and went up to where our ears would be, or right under where our ears would be. It was crazy. You see that, and then you see the ball of the head. And I'm just staring at it, and I tell everybody, I said, there's one watching us down there. They look at it, and they look at it, and they're like, oh, it's just a stump. I said, that is in the middle of our trail. There is no stump in the middle of our trail at all. So we looked at it, and then the conversation changed. And dummy me, like all the other times, there is in a drawer, probably 5 steps from me, there's a pair of binoculars. Did I go get it? No, I didn't. I mean, just it's funny how some of those things like that, you go back later and say, you're such a dummy for not going, getting it and looking at it. But I had everybody, I was so sure of what I was looking at that I had everybody going, marking it by where they sat. Because I said, when you go do something and nobody's looking, it's going to disappear. And they said, no, it won't. I said, yes, it will. So we were cleaning up the table, doing that. We come back and it is gone. Now I could see the traps on it. I could see the outline of the face. I didn't see enough of the face to get some real good definition. I mean, as far as coloration and that kind of stuff. But it was gone. It wasn't there. So later, my wife and I, we get on the side and go down there, and sure enough, you could see where it had stood in the trail and where it had walked into the woods. It was a Bigfoot sitting there watching us, observing us, eating through the windows. I thought that was very neat because That was the first time they had showed themselves to me, but it was in the wide open, and it was not, a lot of times they're going to hide. This one wasn't hiding, and it was there for a long time, but it was squatted down, and it was far enough away. There was no way you're going to get to it. I mean, I have found that anytime they let you see them, there's either something in between you and them to where there's no way you can get to them, either by running to get them, or the creek we have has 10 to 12 foot banks. It's on the other side, about 20 yards on the other side. So you're basically 30 yards away, but there's no way you're going to catch it, because by the time you get down in that creek and back up, it's gone. It's probably a mile away. So they have done that. But I thought that was really unique. But the trapezius muscles on that just amazed me, because it's different, and it almost looked like it attached almost to the outside of the shoulders. Ours goes down, but it's about halfway. It's where our collarbones meet. But this was much wider than ours, and it went up much higher, which I also think is one of the reasons why they don't look like they have a neck. The next one I saw, and I better go ahead and say this. When you're at a cohabitation site and you have built some trust with them and they have accepted you and you've done it through trust and respect, when you go other places, they let you know they're there. I don't know how they do it. But I've talked to other people at cohabitation spots, and they say the same thing. When they go other places, they can see them, or they let them know they're there. So I don't know how they do it, how they mark you, I don't have a clue, but it happens with me. So we had a family outing in LaGrange, Georgia. We had rented this house that was on a steep hill, and there was a pond back behind it. It was such a steep hill that it had a lower section to the house, but you couldn't see it from the front. So we're there, and it looked like an old farm type thing. It had some barns with a bunch of farm equipment in it, had a bunch of blueberry bushes and different things like that. Well, on Saturday, I was in charge of smoking the Boston butts. And the way it is off the inside of the house, there's a deck, but it's like on the second story, since there's a section below it. Now, I had the smoker down on the ground, and I was sitting up above it, so I could see everybody at the pond and stuff. And when it quit smoking enough, I would go back down, add some more chips to it, add some more stuff to get the temperature right. And it was blowing towards the woods. Well, as I'm sitting on this picnic table, I'm facing the woods of where the smoke is going. I'm facing that way I can see the smoke. There's another person I'm talking to, and he's facing the other way. And we're sitting there talking. All of a sudden in the woods, I see something move. And I've always trained my eyes to look parallel to the ground for a deer or something like that. I'm not expecting something to be vertical. I'm looking for something parallel to the ground, and I'm staring. And all of a sudden I realize what I'm looking at is behind a huge pine tree, and I can see one shoulder, half the chest. I can see the head. I can see the arm going around the tree. I can see one leg going down. And I realize I'm looking at it and I'm going, that's a Bigfoot. What the heck? And it was really neat because this one was a different color. This one wasn't black. If you take the color of pine straw and then you take the orange of orangutan and you go halfway in between it, that was the color of the hair. And on the arm that was going around touching the tree on the front of it, the hair was hanging down about 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches. And as the wind would blow, you could see it swaying in the wind. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Now I'm still talking to this other guy, but I'm looking at it. I'm just staring at it. I'm going, I'm not going to go say, hey, look, there's a Bigfoot, because I want to make 100% sure what I'm looking at. But then as I start looking at it, I can see that the skin color is a dark tan. The color, I explained how the color is, and on the arm, it was 3 to 4 inches, and it was long and hanging down. Its hand was huge on the other side of the tree. I mean, it had a huge hand. And then all of a sudden, and I've been watching it for a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and it's looking at me, and then it glances back down at the smoker, and then it looks at me, and then I hear a ding on my phone, a text message. I look down at my phone real quick and see it's just some junk mail. I look back up and it's completely gone. It is not there anymore. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Now, this was in the beginning of when we were seeing them and learning about them, so we weren't far into it. I didn't say anything to anybody about it because at the time I didn't realize that they had a way of marking you so that they would show you them at other places. I didn't know that. I found that out after that when I started asking people. So then the next day, the next morning, we have to leave. We have to be out by 11, and I hate to be late because I don't want them to start trying to say they're going to charge extra for you being 10, 12 minutes late. But we're out there. My wife's drinking her last cup of coffee. It's about 11:05. But I was letting her relax. We just cleaned up the place, ready to walk out, and we're sitting out on that picnic table. And I asked my wife, I told my wife, I said, babe, I think I'm going crazy. She goes, what do you mean? And I told her the whole story of what I saw and everything. She looked at me and she goes, did you see my text message to you yesterday? I said, no. What text message? And the one that dinged was one that came after hers, and I had never seen it because we were so busy because we had so many family members there and stuff. She had sent me a text message with a picture within 5 yards of where I saw that one, and it said, Bigfoot is here. And it was a huge print. And she had sent that to me the day before, and I had never, ever seen it because I had kind of convinced myself I hadn't seen it. But I mean, I saw the hair, I saw it blowing, I saw the face. I knew what I saw, but I'm just like, I've seen one at the house, but why would I see one out here? Nobody ever sees them. But she had taken that picture and sent that, and that print where she showed me it was within 5 yards of where it was standing. And it had to be a young male, a young adult. I honestly, by the chest, I think it was a male because it had the chest of a bodybuilder. It didn't have female boobs. It was like a male. But when I looked where it was based on the little tree branch behind it, because I had kind of looked for some marker, it was about 7 to 7.5 foot tall. So it was not an old adult, it was a young adult. But I think what happened is it smelled that Boston butt, and it was really good. So I don't blame him, but he was coming to the smell to see hopefully if he could get some. And he was staring at me, and then he would stare at the smoke and stare at me again. But it was really amazing because that was the first adult that I'd seen, and it was different color than what I'd seen on our cohabitation site. The next one that I saw, I may have mentioned this one in the first one, but I'm going to go over it again for the people who didn't hear it the first time. I took my mom to the doctor one day. Driving into our house, it's a long driveway back in the woods. You can't even see the house from the road. I saw something kind of glisten in the woods. I had my window rolled down because I always have it rolled down out there because I try to listen for any sounds going on. And we have a water that sits in the middle of the field sometimes, and the frogs make great sounds. And anyway, I saw something glisten. So as I'm looking, I see an outline in the trees of one, but the face stood out. It was shining, and it was about, I'd say probably 6 foot, 6.5 foot. But I pulled my camera up because I had my phone in my hand, and I clicked on camera. I pulled it up and snapped 3 or 4 pictures. When I blew them up, I saw this figure in the woods, but it was in like a little area that had sunlight, and somehow its face was like glistening. It was like somebody had cleaned off their dashboard and it was shining. It was that kind of a shine, and it was a light tan color. And the hair around it was kind of short, but it was solid black, so it stood out. Now, I did not call that one a sighting because I had to blow it up on the camera. But about 3 months later, I was sitting in there watching the TV, fell asleep in the chair like some people do, and I woke up around 2 a.m. It was between 1 and 2, sometime in that area. And I'm looking, our little Yorkie who plays with them was in the other chair sleeping, and it's standing up just staring at the window, not barking, but he's at full attention staring at the window. I'm like, what in the world is he doing? So then I kind of peek over the sofa I'm on, and there is that face I saw in that picture with the black hair around it. The face was rounded, and it was a light tan and shining. Luckily, where the light was over the table was shining down on that face, and I could see it clear as day. Now, I can tell you that the face looked it was more chimpanzee looking than human, but it also had human features. So it was different. It didn't have the big ridges for the eyebrows yet. I think that would get bigger as they got older. It didn't have the real big cheeks because the face was kind of rounded. The hair was about 2 to 3 inches long, but it looked like it was kind of going back as if somebody had put gel in their hair and made it go back like that. That's what the face looked like. Well, I knew they'd been looking in that bay window, but they'd been looking in the back window so they could see the TV. I'd seen the little prints going over to it and just standing there and watching TV. But from that back window, I could never see it. From the front window, I could see them. But I started worrying. I had some people, the family members that were going to come by, and some of them were going to be sleeping in that room. And I didn't want them waking up and seeing this one of the faces in the window and scare them half to death. So I went outside. And of course, when they saw me get up, they left. And I've learned that they know how to read my thoughts. And so I told them in my thoughts and out loud, just to make sure, hey, look, I don't go to your house and go inside and look in it. I don't want you coming to ours and look in it. Now, they've been doing it for a while because they had actually left us gifts. They left us a gift of a arrowhead-looking piece of quartz with a nice heart in it because next to the TV, they saw we had an arrowhead collection, and they found this one the shape of an arrowhead, a beautiful rock. So they were gifting us in appreciation for them looking at it. But I had to stop it because I didn't want to scare somebody half to death by them looking in the window. They never have done it after that. Now, the fourth one is really unique. I'd put some stuff out at the gifting station, and then I was going to ride over to the pond. Now, where the mother stays is up on a hill near the pond, and I knew that there were several babies around. Started to go down into the creek, and all of a sudden I smell their smell. I know there's one there. And the creek it pushes smells. It has its own current, air current. So I'm catching this smell, and there's a little building up there up the hill that I thought one might stay in sometimes. And I'm looking up there, I'm looking in the creek, and I don't see it. So I go on up a little bit. The smell's gone. So I back up into the creek again. The smell's still there. So I looked all around, don't see anything. Then I pull up, and when I get up to the top area where I go to the left to go to the pond, I'm looking in the woods, and there in an opening 10 yards from me, in the sunlight, is It looks like a huge rabbit. There is something that is up with the front legs or arms out and sitting on the butt. And I'm just looking at it. Now, my brain is trying to tell me that this is a rabbit. Okay. And I'm like, that is not a rabbit. And I always trust to verify, even if my brain's trying to tell me something and it keeps trying to tell me this is a rabbit. So I started trying to verify. I look for the tail. Can't see a tail, it would be sitting on it. Then I look for the ears, and there it was. The ears were flat on the side of the head. That was one of the babies. Now, if it would have stood up, it would have been 3 foot to 3.5 foot. I knew it was way too big to be a rabbit. But the ears were what caught my attention on that one, because the ears seemed to be smaller than ours and lower on the head. And it seemed to be flat up against the head. It didn't stick out like ours do. It was flatter up against the head. Now, is that just what that one had? Or is that what they all have? I don't know, because that was the only one I saw and got a good look at the ear. Now, that one was kind of a brownish, but it also had some black in it. So it had some black mixed in with brown, so it was a dark color. But when it took off, it never looked at me. It was looking straight uphill. And on that trail, if you go from where the mom stays, on that trail, go across the creek to go to the gifting station. So I think what had happened was the little one knew that I put stuff out. So it started going down there, and the mom was following. And then when I was looking for it, it kind of, either the mom somehow let it know to come back, or it started going back towards the mom. But when it took off, it definitely was not a rabbit. It took off differently. It was like pulling with its front arms and pushing with its legs, sort of like a dog would. But it moved different than a dog, and it definitely moved different than a rabbit, because it did not hop. In one going really fast, it didn't do that. I saw 2 leaps before it went out of sight, and I tell you, they're fast too. So that was the 4 that I've seen that I know for sure were sightings. But I've had several after they made it a nursery site rather than just a family group. I saw some that go to 90%. Now, the 90%, I'll explain to you why it's 90%. The first one I saw, we were driving down, my wife and I were driving down to the gifting station, and I put something out earlier that morning. And as we're going down the trail to it, I look at the deck, and I'm like, hey, there's something on the deck. There's something on the deck. She goes, where? I said, right there in front of that back box, there's something on the deck. She's looking at it, not saying anything. Then all of a sudden, this thing slid off the deck, slid down like a little kid sliding off of a platform, feet first, went down to the ground, landed with all 4s facing away from me. So all I could see is the butt. And then we went around the corner and went to the woods, but it was weird because I was looking at it from the rear view, and the arms and the legs were outside of the shoulders. It was almost moving spiderish, but it just moved weird because the arms and the legs were kind of outside the body. It was weird. But I knew that if you go around the corner in the trail that it went in, there's a huge vine down there that goes up into a huge tree. There's another vine that goes across to the other side of the creek. And what I looked at and saw, it had gone down that trail. So I'm sure it went up that big vine to get away. But it wasn't moving fast. In fact, when it hit the ground and went to all 4s, it paused for a second or 2 before it started moving. So that was the first one. But the only reason that I don't say that it was a sighting, I'm 90% sure, because I didn't see hair, I didn't see face, and because of those reasons, I can't call it a sighting. But it didn't match any other animal. If it is a dog or a cat or a squirrel, they're going to leap off of it, hit the ground, go 100 miles an hour into the woods. They're not going to just slide straight down, go to all fours, and then move like that. So I'm not going to say it's a sighting, but it's 90%. You know, if I could have seen hair good enough, if I could have seen a face, then I probably would call that a sighting because it didn't match anything any other animal would do. Now, the second one that I've seen, and I think I told a story on the first one, how the Bigfoot had killed a dog, ripped it apart, or was ripping it apart.
Yep.
And we were afraid that the dogs were that they could harm our dogs. At first, we didn't know if it was our dog or not. So I let them know that if they hurt our dogs, it would be breaking the trust with us. They're part of our family. Then 2 dogs that we had in the house, we had one of them at the time was a white pit bull. He started coming back from the gifting station with dirty handprints on it, much bigger than mine. So, and I'd seen that several times, and it was kind of a waxy, it was hard to get off. You had to use Dawn detergent really to get it off, to break it up. It was real greasy. But they were letting me know that they were befriending the dogs. And then I even found where a juvenile or a big one would go there with a little one, and I would find peanut butter cracker wrappers where when I would give them some peanut butter crackers, they were taking it up there and feeding the dogs with it as if they were introducing the baby to the dogs. You know, these are friends of ours. Here, let's go ahead and feed them, and you can go ahead and see them, and they'll know you. I thought that was really unique. Now, the one story that I was telling, the one sighting that I was telling about looking in the windows, that Yorkie that saw it, he would go out there every morning. They would both go every morning and every afternoon, and it'd take them sometimes a long time to come back. So I thought that they were playing with the Bigfoot. All of a sudden one night he ran around the pool, around this big tree that's really spread out and wide, and you can't see underneath it, behind it, anything. I yelled for him. I said, Cookie, come here. Cookie, come here. And I was getting frustrated and got louder. All of a sudden, I see this thing coming out from behind the tree really fast, and I see Cookie following it. Now, Cookie wasn't barking at it. Cookie wasn't. It looked like he was playing with it. And it moved like a chimpanzee, just like a chimpanzee. And I'm sitting there at the time thinking, what kind of animal moves like that? How could an animal be injured to move like that? And I just could not figure it out any at all. But at that point in time, Cookie was chasing the little baby Bigfoot. And here's why I think that was a baby Bigfoot. About 4 or 5 months later, we had a trailer over by the dog pen to block their view because we had a party outside, a bunch of friends over, and we didn't want the dogs seeing us from the outside. We have some dogs outside in the pen. We didn't want them seeing us and barking like crazy. So all of a sudden, I see Cookie run out from behind the little trailer. And I'm going, what's he doing? He kept looking back behind the trailer. And I'm like, what's he looking at? Now, we've got some that are outside dogs and some that are inside dogs. The little one we call Cookie, the little Yorkie, was one of our son's dogs, so we kept it inside. And anyway, all of a sudden, something moving like a chimpanzee ran out behind him and was running behind him. Cookie goes up to the wood's edge, stays there. It goes past him into the woods. Cookie looks in the woods for a minute, then he runs back to me, as if he was being a guide to help it get back in the woods safely. But it moved just like a chimpanzee. And that's when I realized that is a chimpanzee. I mean, that is a baby Bigfoot. Because when I went over to the backside of that trailer the next morning, I could see little baby Bigfoot prints over there. So evidently Cookie was over there playing with it, and when it heard me, it wanted to get away, and Cookie was trying to help it get away back into the woods. But again, I didn't see a face or hair good enough to call it a sighting. I mean, to me, those two, if there's an escaped chimpanzee in the area, it could be that, but which rules out the fact that it couldn't be any other animal because the way it moved was like a chimpanzee. And both of them had solid black hair. Both of them were solid black. Now, this last one is kind of an amazing situation. Believe it or not, it was Halloween of last year. My wife wanted me to take people out and scare them on the trails and take them out at night because it's kind of spooky and scary. And I really didn't want to because I try to leave the nighttime for the Bigfoot to do what they do. I look at it, the nighttime is there and the daytime is ours type situation. And all of a sudden, I knew I wasn't going to get out of it. I said, I'm not getting out of it. So let me go ahead and ride them around and one time and be done with it. And I'll try to scare them real bad so they don't want to stay out there. And so one of our relatives and her little boy was with me in the side-by-side. We were riding down the trail where the gifting station was. And as luck have it, I put some food in it that morning. As we're riding down the trail, the same situation we had before, I said, look, there's something on the deck. And she goes, what? I said, there's something down there on the deck. You could see the eye shine. Now, the eye shine was a kind of rusty red amber. It wasn't amber color. It had kind of a rusty red color, but it was amber looking, if that makes any sense. That's the only way I can describe it. And this thing's looking at me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I have that thing protected from raccoons. And it's not a raccoon anyway, because a raccoon eye shine is bright yellow. That is definitely not yellow. And but yet it's small enough that if it stood up, it would probably be 3 foot tall. So it's small. And it was just staring at us. And where I usually make the turn to the left in the U to go away from it, I decided not to. I decided I wanted to see exactly what that was. I wanted to verify if it was a weird raccoon or if it was a baby Bigfoot. All of a sudden, now we're about 25 yards away, 30 at most, and our headlights, the gifting station has 4x4s going up in a platform, but you can see underneath it and on the other side. Behind it was a box I'd made. And even if he went over it and went off the side, you'd see it, basically. So we're both staring at it. We're looking at it, the relative, me, and her little boy. And all of a sudden, it turns and looks towards the woods. Then it turns back and looks at us. It disappears. Right in our sight, it just disappeared. It wasn't there anymore. It was looking straight at us. It did not turn its head. It was gone. We could see underneath it because by that time we were probably 20 yards at most away. And I had the lights on bright, but it's a downhill slope. So even on bright was shining underneath it. So I stopped and asked the relative. I just stopped and asked her. I said, tell me what you just saw. She said, we saw something on the deck. It was staring at us. It looked in the woods and looked back, and it just disappeared. I said, yeah, that's what I saw too. I said, do you think there's any way it could have jumped off or gone over that box without us seeing it? She goes, there's no way. We can see everything to the right and left and behind it. There's no way. She said, it just disappeared. The little boy, his eyes were as big around as a baseball. He was too young to really talk good, but he knew something crazy happened, but he didn't know what. But it just disappeared in front of us. So I think that was possibly one. I want to go back a little bit, though. I left out some stuff I was going to tell you about the LaGrange sighting. A year and a half later, I took my wife's dad. He was retiring, and we took him crappie fishing on a big lake. And as we were crappie fishing on the lake, there were some islands on it. I went around one island, and there were several of us there. There were like 6 fishing, and then there was the guy that we were with. We wanted to make sure he had some because we had a bunch of people that were coming to celebrate his retirement, and we were going to have a fish fry. So we're riding around it, we're fishing, and he's got a bunch of structures out, and he usually puts them in between cuts of islands or stuff like that. And then the crappie just get all over it, and you can just catch a bunch of them. So I go by this little bitty island, and I'm looking through it, and in my head, I'm just going, I wonder if there's any Bigfoot on any of these islands. So we go to the very next island, and it's a pretty big island. You can't see through it. It's long. It's probably half a mile long or something like that. And in my head, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if there's any Bigfoot on that island. All of a sudden, there is a tree knot comes from the island. The guy next to me cuts trees down for a living out of people's yards and stuff, or during hurricanes or tornadoes and stuff. That's what he does. I turned to him. I said, "You hear that?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Have you ever heard anything like that doing what you do?" He said, "No." He said, "It sounded like somebody took a huge bat and he wrapped it upside a tree, but it was louder than a baseball bat." I said, "I know." So I turned to the guide. I said, "Does anybody live on this island?" He goes, "No, they're not allowed to live on the island." He said, "Now there's a couple of places where you can go and land and go on the island." He said, "But we'll know here in a minute. We're about to leave and go to the other side." We go and leave and go to the other side. There's no boats. There's no signs that any boat has landed. So I'm like, it read my mind and let me know it was there. How crazy is that? But by this time I knew they would let you know. If you're from a cohabitation site, they would let you know at other places. We go to another island. It's bigger than that one. Do the same thing in my head. There's 3 tree knocks come from that island immediately after I think that. 2 from one spot and 1 from another spot. The guy next to me just looked at me and he said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't have a clue what's doing that." I said, "I think I do." And I told him what I thought it was, and he says, "It can't be." And I said, "Well, can you tell me anything else it could be?" He said, "No." He said, "There's no way it's a woodpecker. There's no way it's a tree branch falling." He said, "I have no idea." I said, "Well, I've heard it before. They make those sounds. And whether they're making it with their mouth or whether they're actually hitting the tree, I don't know because I've never seen them actually making them. But it's always referred to as a tree knock." Now, I've also heard mouth pops where they're popping the top of their mouth. I've heard that too. But that is not near as loud as what this is, and it's a total different sound. So then after we get out, we catch a bunch of fish, cook them up. After we get out, I go on to one of the mapping programs where you can look at it from the skies. And I look in that house that we had stayed at. There were woods all the way from it to that lake. And the lake that had the big island where we heard the 3 knocks from 2 different locations was right in front of it. I'm like, yep, they're here, and they can go at night. They can swim out to these islands, rest in peace, because there's nobody coming out here. It's a perfect place for them to go hide because it's big enough island that they can go and get away from anybody going on the island, and people don't go out there. I said, that makes perfect sense. So I actually told that sighting to a person who published it somewhere. And she called me the other day, about 2 months ago, and she goes, "Hey, I got news for you." I said, "Yeah." She said, "I had another sighting from LaGrange. And I had pinpointed the location of that house when we were there on my phone and sent it to her." She said that other sighting was 1,000 yards from where you saw yours. She said it was a different color, it was a different size, but it was 1,000 yards from where you saw that one. I said, "Well, you're saying that like I was lying to you." She goes, "No, no, 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 no. I didn't think you were lying to me, but it was 1,000 yards. It was that close." And I'm like, thinking to myself, yeah, it sounds like you weren't sure about mine, because you did say, well, that's awful close to a decent sized town, you know? So yeah, I was wondering that, but it's rather unique that they let me know a year and a half later around those islands that they were there. I thought that was crazy, but smart and good at the same time. Now, I will also tell you that my daughter bought a house out in the country. First time I went to her house, on her back porch, there's tree knocks behind the porch. And my daughter knows what tree knocks are. Now, it had never knocked, nothing had ever knocked when she was out there. But I go out there on the back porch and immediately one knocks. She's out there with me and looks at me and she goes, "Really? Now you brought them here?" And I said, "No, I bet you they've always been here. You just didn't know it. They're
That's
just letting
funny.
me know that they're."
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So, and I guarantee you, the first 5 times I went there, 3 times I got tree knots going on their back porch. So it was kind of crazy. So now, unless you have any questions, I'll go into some more interactions and some more things I've seen. It's totally up to you.
I do actually have a question based on last times. You mentioned you have like a handyman that has
Yes.
experienced some things. Has he experienced other things that we didn't talk about last time as well?
Yes. Yeah, he was with me one time. I was at the pond and there was a limb broke really high up. I mean, I'm 6'4" and got long arms. I was holding a baseball bat to try to see the height that it was broken at, and the baseball bat that I'm holding straight up didn't even reach where it was broken at. But there were other smaller ones around it, and they weren't broken. And so I thought that was extremely weird. Plus, it was pointing towards one of their trails. So I had told him about it. I actually took pictures of it when I was there, because it was fresh and pointing towards a trail. And I'm like, in the past, I've always tried to rule those kind of things out, because a 30 or 40-pound raccoon could break things if it jumps on something too small. But none of the others around it it seems like they would have been bent. They would have been something if a raccoon fell off of it. So it made no sense to me. And when I looked under the bottom of the tree, it looked like I saw a footprint leading towards a tree. And so I thought, well, maybe one of them went up there and broke the branch, or standing there and broke the branch. So I told him about it. He said, "Well, let's go see." So we go look at it. And when I get there, I'm looking at the tree. I don't see that limb at all. It's not there. And then I'm looking around. I said, "Wait a second." I took a picture of it. So we pulled up the picture and was looking at the picture. The one that went up that high had been broken off about 2 foot from the ground. That limb was nowhere on the ground, and something had wiped mud over it to make it appear like an old break. Now, how smart is that? They actually saw me looking at it, didn't want me to see what they were doing or why they were doing it. I don't know why they wouldn't want me to, but they went back and broke it off, and then they took some mud out of the pond, wiped it on it, so that you couldn't tell it was it. Now, if I didn't have that picture, we never would have figured it out. But when we just pulled up the picture, put it next to a tree, and we were going limb by limb going up, and then saw the gap and went down and saw it down there. And it was still green. The part below it was still green. So it broke that off to hide it from me. And when we rubbed it, the way we know it was mud, because when we rubbed the top, the dirt and mud, some of it got on our finger. It's not that it was wet, but it was kind of tacky. So some of it was on your finger. So we knew that they had wiped mud on it to try to hide it. Another thing he saw, and I don't think I told you about it on the first one. I'm not sure. I may have. Maybe I did, but I didn't go into this part of the detail. One time they had left us some peach pits on the fabric where they wanted us to plant some more of those trees because they liked it. Now, I'd seen some prints of some juveniles going over there to that tree. They were left there. There was 6 or 8 of them. As I'm looking at it, the pulp had been sucked out of it. There's no ants. There's never any ants on there. And that's something that if we ever get into the special abilities sometime, then I can tell you something I know they do about that. But no ants around, no roaches, no nothing, but all the pulp had been sucked out. And they were real white. It was fresh, like from the night before. So I told him about it. And we were riding down that road. He said, I want you to look at it. Tell me what you think. He went over there and looked at it. He said, that's fresh. That's from last night. He goes, there's no ants on it. There's no pulp in it. He said, I see this little print over here in this ant bed, because there's an ant bed over there, but the ants never go on the fabric. He goes, I don't know what else it could be. There's nothing that I know that can take a peach pit, suck the pulp out of it, and leave it like that. He goes, there's nothing. He says, I don't even know a person can suck the fleshy part of the peach out of it like that. He said, I don't know, but it's there and it hadn't been touched and it's fresh and there's no ants on it. He said, I don't know what else it could be but that. So he's seen that. He's seen that the small footprint. He's seen the other thing, and he's seen some other stuff too on his own. I don't know. Yeah, on the first one I mentioned how they took the 35-pound bag of dog food out, and it left me big poops as a gift back for it.
Yes.
He saw 3 of those also.
Oh, wow.
So, in fact, he called me on it at the time because at the time he didn't know what it was. And he goes, hey, I just wanted to know, is there like any really big dogs on your place? Because there's 2 huge poops over here, and I've never seen anything this big. And then he goes, called me again on the way out, and he goes, I just wanted to let you know that something was really wanting me to see their poop, because as I'm driving out in the middle of the trail, there was one just done and steam was coming off of it in the middle of the trail, like they wanted to make sure that I saw it. And I said, yeah, I think I know what it is. Because if you remember, the very first gift they gave us, they moved it to make sure we saw it. So, and they want you to take their gifts. Now, that is something I did not pick up and take. And I just kind of let them know at a later time that that's something that, you know, that I appreciate the gift, but that's not something that I would normally take. So I didn't, but thank you for leaving it anyway. So I did let them know that, but he saw those poops and he could not figure it out, because the first poop that I saw was over a foot long, at least a foot long. I really think it's over because, well, it had to be over. When I say a foot long, I'm talking about my foot. My foot's 13 and a half inches long, and where my shoe is, and it was longer than my shoe. So it was over 13 and a half inches long, and it was as big around as 3/4 of a Pringles can. It would have stopped the toilet up for days, I think. So he has seen other things like that since he's been here. I've got several people that have witnessed things from here.
Oh, so it's not just, well, I know you've talked about relatives and you have a handyman, but you have multiple other people that have also experienced things on your property?
Well, the relative that I'm talking about on that one, I would let you know that they also will warn us of danger. And one day it was her and a friend of hers. We went to the pond to feed the fish. And I'd heard lightning way off, but the wind was blowing that way. And the skies were clear where we were. So we go over there to the pond. We're feeding the fish, and I hear lightning striking. It's a little bit closer, but the wind's still blowing the other way. But sometimes a low-level wind will be blowing one way. The clouds are coming the other way. But at that time, 25 yards from me in a tree branch snaps real loud. She jerks her head and looks. I jerk my head and look. And as I said during the first time, some of my relatives say that I have some empathic abilities where I can feel feelings that others are feeling. I knew exactly the second my dad passed away and wasn't there. I know every time my mom gets sick, I call her. And I said, hey, we got to go right now. And she goes, why? I said, they just let me know we need to leave right now. So let's go. And she goes, why? Are we in danger? Are they going to attack us? I said, no. I told her, they just told me, but it was more of a feeling, thought type thing, that we're going to get struck by lightning or a bad storm here, and they know we don't like to be out in the rain, but we need to leave now so we don't get involved in it. So we pulled away from the pond. We were going down the trail. Now, the two of them said that they heard lightning strike at the pond. I didn't hear it, so I can't attest that that actually happened. But we get to the house. We park the side-by-side in the barn. We go into the house. We're 2 steps in the house, and the biggest storm ever hits, and it had hail mixed with the water and lightning like crazy. So it was warning us that we need to leave. The storm was about to hit. And even said, you need to leave now. And if we hadn't left right when we did, we would have got hit by it. So but she was there with a friend who is a different person that witnessed that. The other person heard it also and experienced that also. Now, one of my sons have seen 4 here. He's seen 4. And then there's a couple other people that have witnessed things happen around it, like a warning, huge branch break and knock into the ground when he started walking towards the woods, looking at some lumber that had been set out, and he was by himself, and a huge branch about 50 foot up in a tree came down. And he called me on that and says, is there something I need to worry about? And I said, why? What happened? And he told me about it. He said, it sounded like a whole tree fell. Oof. And I said, no, you're okay. Just, don't go in the woods. You're fine. But some of that stuff has happened on different occasions because they do try to protect our place. And if a person is by himself near our door, which he was redoing the flooring on our back porch, they want you to leave. They don't want you going in our house. It's sort of like, I guess it's the best guard dog service you can get. I can't imagine a dog that could do any better than a Bigfoot guarding your property or you.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mess around with a property guarded by Bigfoot. I mean, that would be real dumb.
Yeah, it would be real dumb.
Oh my!
I would tell you one other amazing thing that happened. And I'm pretty sure I didn't tell about this the first time because I've got hours upon hours of interactions with them. So I had 10 to 12 cameras out all the time in the beginning, and I left them out because I always loved to watch deer. And in our front field, we had a lot of deer, especially bucks, come in growing their antlers. So I could see all the bucks growing their antlers before the season, before they split up and go their own way. And I used to love to watch them because it's amazing how their antlers grow with the velvet and how fast it grows. They can grow an inch long a week. It's crazy how fast they can grow. But anyway, I started picking up some wild hogs, two huge wild boars, over 300 pounds each on my cameras. And they started rooting out in the front field. Not going to have that, you know. I mean, they were over 300 pounds. Both of them were wild boars. And one of them was black and white. It was a domestic wild mix. And then the other one was a pure Russian black boar. I mean, the tail's different, the body is different, but both of them were boars, male, they were males called boars, over 300 pounds. So I'm like, they had dug this area out, pushed all this grass back, and I'm like, I've got to go buy a gun so I can kill them, but I want it to be quiet enough that it's not disturbing the neighbors when I do. So I went and bought a gun, put a night vision scope on it, and it was kind of stupid of me to not say anything to them before, but I didn't really think that they would help, honestly. But I go down there to the gifting station. There's two places I kind of know that I can go to and use my thoughts, even though I think they can read my thoughts a lot further than that, but I go there when it's really important, both spots, and send a message. And I tell them, I said, look, there's two huge boars on the property. I've got to get rid of them. I've got a gun and I got a night scope, but I know y'all don't want me hunting at night. So if y'all can get rid of them for me, leave me a sign letting me know you got the message. And I always say that. Give me a message, you know. And they either do a tree knock at the time, they'll do a whoop, or they'll do something to let me know they got the message. Probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, we're out in the front field looking in that area where they had been. And as I'm standing there in the field right next to it, I see some baby Bigfoot prints in the dirt. I'd never seen any prints in that area. And so I'm got my camera and I'm taking a picture, you know, in the middle. I'm kind of zooming in. And my wife goes, babe, do you see what's in front of you? I said, no, what are you talking about? She said, you don't see that print in front of you. And I said, no. I stepped back to where she was, and there was a huge print in front of me. It was so big, my mind would not register it as a print until I backed up to where she was. Then I could see it was a footprint. And so I'm like, they gave me a message. They got the message about the wild hogs. Believe it or not, first off, there was that big print, and then there were 2 or 3 little ones, prints in the mud. And that print that was left, that was only the second or third time I'd ever seen that print. Now, I'd seen a print that was 19 and a half inches long, 10 and a half inches wide from the male that was there the most, but I'd never seen one this big. I mean, this thing is huge. Now, Jeremiah, I won't tell you how big it was, but if you ask me, I might let it slip because everybody's going to say there's no way possible. Well, I've got a picture of it with my foot next to it. But it was crazy how big it is. So I decided, well, let me see what happens here. And then within the first week, the black and white one doesn't show up. They had always shown up together. The black one and the black and white one has never shown up together at all. They've always shown up together, always been together. I've never seen one without the other. But the black and white one disappears. It's gone. It's not, the other one's coming, but that one disappears. 2 weeks later, the big Russian boar disappears. It's gone. Never to be seen again. I think they brought that one in. That had to be the granddad. I think they brought it in to help get rid of the wild hogs. But the reason I say that is I've only seen that print 2, maybe 3 times. The first time I thought it was a double print where one had stepped in another one because I couldn't believe one would be that big. But then I saw that one, and then I'd seen another one after that, and that's in from 2020 to 2025 basically. I'd only seen those 3, so I think they colored in, and it kind of makes sense. Most of the time, things in the wild are not going to attack something that can injure them, especially if it's something that can break your leg, break your ribs or the arm or something like that. Because if you get a broken leg and you're a Bigfoot, I don't know how it would heal. It may not be a death sentence, but somebody's going to have to be helping you eat until it heals and do stuff like that. So I think they called that one in to help get rid of them, so, the others wouldn't get hurt. And I also tell you, on the other side of the road across from our property, they have some wild hogs come in their field about 2 or 3 times a month. They will not come to our side of the road at all. I actually drove, because they got 2 roads behind it. I saw some one time, so I drove behind them, was going to push them towards the road. They went and ran towards the road, then split and ran on both sides around me back in the woods over there. They would not come on the property. It was crazy. So, what do you think about that? That was just, to me, that was nuts.
That's pretty wild. Can you tell me how big the prints were?
Okay, I will tell you that my foot's 13 and a half inches long.
Okay.
Double that. That's the length of it.
Wow. So we're talking like Oregon size.
27 inches long.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
12 inches wide. And the toes would fit in the palm of my hand. The big toe would fit in the palm of my hand. That's how big the toe was.
My goodness.
Now I'll tell you another interesting story about that though. So when I had a couple of people come and investigate after I told the guy about it, and he said that we have Bigfoot, there were a couple of people came and kind of looked around. They found all kinds of stuff, and they found a big boy trail. Are you familiar with a big boy trail?
Never heard of
it. Actually found 2. You never heard of it? Okay, it just maybe it's a Georgia thing. I don't know.
Okay.
But a big boy trail is a trail that is wide enough and tall enough that the biggest one of the bunch can get through it and not hit any branches. What they do is, it has to be a trail where the trees are naturally wild enough. They break the branches on both sides of the trail all the way up to where there's no branches that can stick out and hit it as it's running through, so they can have a quick getaway and be quiet. It's so funny to see one, because you'll see all the branches broken on both sides, and you look on the other side of the tree and it has branches. Now, the branches that when they came had been broken for a long time, so they'd been there for a long time. Now, the branches when they were there were broke up to 15 foot tall. When I measured that, when knowing the measurements of that foot on Expedition Bigfoot, the TV show, one time they had this person that's supposed to be a foot expert that can tell you by the size how tall it is, and she had 2 different sizes, and she gave it, and I just kind of divided in inches what she said, because they told how long it was and how tall it would be. So I used the numbers that they use. As a matter of fact, one was a little higher than the other. I used the lower of the 2. And when I did that, it said that Bigfoot was going to be 14 foot 7 inches tall. And I'm like, that makes sense. The big boy trails, all the branches are broke up to 15 foot. That makes perfect sense. It's one of those things where it matches up with what you've been told. They always break the branches off as high as the biggest one can get through there and not get hit by anything. And, some of those branches can go down, or the limbs off of it can go down. So you would think it would be about the height that they were, so that those branches coming down wouldn't hit them. And I thought that was really interesting when I figured out how tall that one would have been by how long the footprint was.
That's up in North Georgia?
Wow.
Wow.
North Georgia.
That man, the more people I talk to from North Georgia, it is absolutely insanity up there.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
nuts.
And you've got some that travel through, migrate through, and then you got some that are there all the time. These are here all the time. Now, I can tell you there's 2 to 3 weeks in the fall or late summer. It's basically when the apples are ripe. The little ones, the juveniles and the babies will stay, but all the adults leave for 2 to 3 weeks. And I really think they're going to eat as much as they can of the apples and other stuff, other crops at that time, so they can get an extra layer of fat for the winter time. But they come back. And that makes sense. They do it every year. It could be 1 to 3 weeks. And I think it really depends on is how the crops are and the stuff is in that area, how long it takes. But I think that all the adults, they just take and go. And then they come back after, 1 to 3 weeks. And I think that's very interesting. So they don't really migrate, but they do move to get as much food as they can before the winter. Now, I've always wondered about the migration. Are they really migrating, or are they following the food? Or do they have certain areas they're going to where they're basically impregnating the females to get ready, for the next year?
Right.
That rabbit hole, when you jump in that rabbit hole, when you get an answer to one question or think you have an answer to one question, it always is 3 to 4 more.
No, exactly. Yeah.
It's disastrous to get caught in that rabbit hole. And I really think it's more like an ant bed than a rabbit hole, because there's way more branches than a rabbit hole's got.
Neal, it has been just a real treat having you on again. So let's say last question. What would you say, what's the most recent thing that's happened to you guys on the property?
Well, I've got some personal issues. I don't get to go out as much as I normally do.
Sure.
But I had the door of our barn where I keep the side-by-side was broken. The springs were broken in, so I couldn't close it. And I'm trying to think the day. What is today? That would have been, today's Wednesday. It would have been Sunday. So Sunday, I go out to the barn. And I haven't been able to put as much stuff out as much as possible, but there was some stuff in the back of the side-by-side. And I didn't do an inventory of everything that was in there, but they know that if I have anything extra, it's in the back of the side-by-side. They had left me a rock, and you can tell this rock has been manipulated by something, put in the back right next to some of the food that was left that was not there before. So they left me a gift. I don't know if they took something out of the bag, some food out of the bag, and left me that as a gift, or if they put that in there for me to remind me, hey, we're still here, we're still hungry, but I found that gift on Sunday in the back of the side-by-side. So I thought that was rather crazy. Oh, and I took some food down there that day. Something else very interesting happened. I really need to put it on the Facebook page. It's super quiet that day. No noise around hardly anywhere, which is strange. Usually down around the gifting station it's super quiet, but not everywhere else. But that day it's super quiet everywhere. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? I go down to the gifting station. I go ahead, when I see that rock, I go ahead and say, well, I've got stuff in the back of the car. Let me get it and take it down there. So I got it and was taking it down there and started to put it out. As I opened it up and started putting something in, it sounded like 2 doves cooing super loud within 25 yards of me. Now, we used to have a lot of dove in the past, but we don't have that many anymore because the trees that they used to land in, they don't get any anymore. I tend to believe that after they made the nursery, that some young ones went up there and grabbed them and killed them and threw them down for the others to eat, because even if you go up there at night, and they can be in the woods and see where they're landed, if they go up there at night, a big one can't get up in those trees. And not only that, but if they take off at night, they're going to try to go back to the same branch. So if your little one can get up there and grab it, break its neck, throw it down, they can get rid of a bunch of dove really quick. So that's kind of getting off it a little bit, but I'm hearing this super loud cooing going on real close to me. And I said, that is louder than normal doves cooing. I said, I wonder if that's one or two down here excited because I'm going to put food out. Now, I've heard a lot of different whistle sounds and a lot of different stuff, but I'd never heard the dove coo like that. So I go up to the house. I'm there that night. And actually, I got the day wrong because it would have been Saturday. It was not Sunday. It definitely was Saturday because Sunday was the Super Bowl. So it was definitely Saturday. So anyway, about 9 o'clock at night, my son and I are in there watching TV. The TV's on, is turned on loud. And behind our bathroom, off of the back porch, there's a little trail right behind it. And a lot of times they'll come up to it and they'll tap on the window or tap on the wall just to let me know they're there. Or they actually have gotten a big sniff on me one time, and that was really interesting. But around behind the bathroom right there, there was real loud cooing. It sounded like two cooing to each other, just like I heard at the platform at the gifting station. I'm like, wait a second. Dove don't coo at night. There's no tree over there. It was loud enough that we could hear it over the TV through the window. And it's right there behind, there's rose bushes in between that and the bathroom. And that's where it's coming from. And so I was like, that bird does not make a noise at night, because if it makes a noise at night, it's giving it away to the owls and the other thing where they can swoop down and get it. So I just kind of laughed to myself. I told my son, and I said, you hear that? He goes, yeah, it's doves cooing. I said, they don't do that at night. I said, they're right behind the bathroom. There's no tree over there. And he said, Dad, are you thinking? I said, yeah, pretty much. It's a Bigfoot. So, yeah, I mean, stuff like that happens so much that I almost forget about it. I mean, it almost escapes my mind. Now, for a person that's researching them all the time, that would be amazing, and it is amazing to me. But I've heard them do it so much with different sounds, because it seems like they can imitate anything. They do it so much with different sounds. It's not unusual for me. I guess the old saying here, like I've always said, here the unusual is the usual. The things you don't expect is usually what happens here.
Wow.
So,
what a way to put it.
Anyway, that's that.
You've got some wild stuff going on that property. Neal, do you mind spending a few minutes? You guys have a really cool website, but also you have a really cool event coming up too, just in case people missed it last time.
Right. We have it's called an Encounters Conference coming up March the 14th and March the 15th. There are still tickets available. If you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, you're not too far away. It's just south of town in Jonesboro, Georgia. We got some really good speakers coming. And what we're focusing on is people that have actually seen them or had a lot of interactions with them that you can talk to and get your questions answered. My goal is, and there's a lot of times when I go to them, I go there specifically to meet one or two people and ask them a question that I have questions about that's fallen into the rabbit hole, and they never seem to answer the question. It seems like anything that's how do I say it, on the woo side, or things that could affect people following them, they skirt around. They don't want to admit it, but they don't say no, that doesn't happen either. So a non-answer is almost an answer when I ask them, but I would like to ask them more questions. So our goal is to answer your questions. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this to get famous. As a matter of fact, I will say things that I've seen that I guarantee you, if anybody thought about putting me on a TV show, I'm gone. I'm out of it because I've seen too much and already got it out there that I've seen it. But that's me. I get the feeling, and I know this is weird. This is really weird. I get the feeling that the mature female here wants me to talk about them to let people know that they are good ones. They're not all bad. There's good ones. In fact, I think that basically there's a lot more good ones than bad ones. But they also are kind of where they want me to. They're also scared at the same time because they don't want to mess up where they are. So I do everything possible not to give up the location that they're at. But anyway, getting back to the conference, there are tickets still available. And there was a snafu to where when we tested the payment system on the cell phone, we used the biggest cell phone and it worked. But some of the smaller cell phones, some of the letters moved down into pay now area and it would accept it. So I'm afraid there might be some people that feel like that the tickets were limited, are limited, but they might have felt like the tickets were sold out. It's not. There are still tickets available. There are some people that hit it that were trying to buy tickets that got blocked. So I've been trying to get that out there too, that, hey, we do have tickets available. That's been resolved and everything like that. But it's going to be a really good conference because I'm planning on bringing in a lot of the gifts that I've got because given us a lot of gifts. Some are just totally amazing. They've dripped down a peanut butter jar down, ripped it down like ripping a banana. Just all kinds of stuff that's crazy. Stepped on one, left a baby footprint on a peanut butter jar. But it's going to be a really great event. And if you're in the area, please, the tickets are online, encountersconference.com. You can go on there and buy tickets. There's still some available. And I think we have one or two spots left for vendors. So if you happen to be a vendor and you would like to come sell stuff there, there's also a place on there that you can go to be a vendor. But I'm really excited about it. It's the first one we have. And I'm hoping that we can have one every year because I think people want to be able to ask questions and get answers to what they are. Now, everybody will have different opinions, may have different opinions by how much they've seen and how long they've been around. Lucky enough, the people that are here are very open-minded and they may have a different opinion, but they're not going to let the other people, they're not going to say that's the only thing it could be, basically. They're open-minded enough to know that they don't know everything, but we will answer your questions if you have questions.
That sounds great. And you've also got bigfoottalk.com, which there's so much information on there. People really need to check out that website. It's a good one. So
And we have a Facebook page also, this bigfoottalk.com, and it has a lot of the interactions. There are some interactions on the bigfoottalk.com, but that's more of the information about patterns you see and what you can do in certain situations. But our Facebook page, bigfoottalk.com, is going to have some interactions in it for you.
that's awesome. I know you're sharing stuff in my group all the time, which is just great stuff. It's Bigfoot sightings and research, I think. I don't know. Someone let me know. But Neal, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. Definitely keep in touch. It's always fun to talk to you. Thank you.
You're welcome very much, and I'll be glad to come back anytime.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. The Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one. If you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.